Islam, Shalom, Assalamu alaikum, Hola, Aloha, Osio, Islam tribe. Thank you for joining me. This is your brother Zach Bay, Indigenous American Moor, coming to you live and in full effect. I'm going to be going over as you see, I'm looking at the HJ Res 3. That's a House Joint Resolution for number 3 from the 110th Congress, first session, to acknowledge a long history of official depredation and ill-conceived policies by the United States government regarding Indian tribes and offer an apology to all Native peoples on behalf of the United States. That's the corporation. All right, so I'm going to go through it. I got a few highlighting points, and I'm going to go into a few more details on some things that isn't actually in here, but if you have been doing studying, if you connect the dots, you'll be able to see the connection. This was presented on January 4, 2007. So 2007. So in 2007, I was going through this. All right. So it was presented by Mrs. Joanne Davis of Virginia, introducing the following joint resolution, which referenced the Committee on Natural Resources. All right, so Joint House Resolution to acknowledge a long history of official depredation and ill-conceived policies by the United States government regarding Indian tribes and offer an apology to all Native peoples on behalf of the United States. Now, keep in your mind, whenever it says Indian tribes or Native peoples, just replace that word with Moors. But that's who we are. And, certain records and documents give details on who we were or how the identities were changed over time in certain treaties and agreements and things like that. And this resolution is documenting times where the United States government received help from the indigenous peoples, were supported by indigenous peoples, and pretty much just spit in their face, the face of our ancestors, the ones who actually helped them by being, part of humanity and trying to serve a greater good, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. That's how people were operating back then on this land, Turtle Island. We weren't claiming ownership of land and in all resources on it and above it and below it. We weren't doing that type of stuff. We were sharing it, it wasn't for anybody to claim. It was for all to use, all to enjoy, all peoples. But let's go. Whereas the ancestors of today's Native peoples, Moors, inhabited the lands of the present day United States since time immemorial. That's the beginning of time immemorial. And for thousands of years before the arrival of peoples of European descent. Whereas the Native peoples have for millennia honored and protected and stewarded this land we cherish. Whereas the Native peoples are spiritual peoples with a deep and abiding belief in the Creator, and for millennia, their people have maintained a powerful spiritual connection. Excuse me, because I'm kind of looking back and forth at the phone through it and actually on the page, so I could try to keep it, lined up so you kind of read along with me. Hopefully, you can get some good images. So if you need to pause the video and read it for yourself instead of real time, you can just pause it and read over it. And you can also find this online, the document yourself, and actually just type it in and look for it and actually read it for yourself. And please like, share, subscribe, give a thumbs up on the video, interact with the content. Thank you. Definitely appreciate that. And let's continue. To these lands, and as is evidenced by their customs and legends, whereas the arrival of Europeans in North America opened a new chapter in the histories of Native peoples, whereas while establishment of permanent European settlements in the in North America did stir conflict with nearby Indian tribes, peaceful and mutually beneficial interactions also took place. Whereas the foundational English settlement of Jamestown, Virginia, and Plymouth, Massachusetts, owned their survival in Massachusetts owed their survival in large measures to the compassion and aid of native peoples in their vicinities. I mean, the people that were around them. When they were over here trying to survive and live off the land, our people came when they were starving in the wintertime to give them supplies and provision. That's why I hope all that fake Thanksgiving story came from how they used that and started doing massacres and started using genocide after they learned how to collect food and store it during the winter time, how to survive during the winter time, how the migrationary patterns of certain creatures were that they can hunt in order to survive and sustain themselves, all that, fishing methods and techniques, farming the land. You know, when you store the land and protect it, we taught every single other culture who came here how to farm the land. And they stole it from underneath our feet. Let's keep going. Whereas in the infancy of the United States, the founders of the Republic, you got to keep that in mind, the founders of the Republic, it was never meant to be a democracy, expressed their desire for just relationships with for a just relationship with the Indian tribes, as evidenced by the Northwest Ordinance enacted by Congress in 1787. Don't forget, you see how it says the Northwest Ordinance. This is the Northwest Gate, family. See, that's a gem right there. Northwest, the Northwest Ordinance. This is the Northwest Gates. Al Morocco, Mexam, Al Maghrib, Al Aqsa, Turtle Island, Extreme West, Morocco. That's here, this land. Let's keep going. Whereas Indian tribes provided great assistance to the fledgling republic. So they keep telling you, the fledgling republic, when they first started off, we gave them a chance. The first nation to recognize this nation was Morocco. The Moors. As it strengthened and grew, including valuable help to Meriwether Lewis and William Clark on their epic journey from St. Louis, Missouri to the Pacific coast. Everybody most people know the story about Lewis and Clark. Lewis and Clark, the so-called explorers, adventurers. You know they were helped up by indigenous people, not just Sacagawea, who were offered her help as a guide. They also had a brother, a Moorish brother, who was with them from the eastern tribes, who helped to translate, but they called him a slave. They say this brother was a slave, and they say after that he potentially was set free for his help in that. All right, so let's continue. Whereas native peoples and non-native settlers engaged in numerous armed conflicts, whereas the United States government violated many of the treaties ratified by Congress, other diplomatic agreements with Indian tribes. See, it keeps saying with Indian tribes. When they put that in there, that shows you how they removed the name of the Moors, which they would have had to uphold those agreements and treaties with. When they started identifying our people as Indians and changing the narrative, they could pretty much do whatever they want, because this land is not India. This is not the West Indies. See, you got to realize what kind of language they use, how they keep switching up between native peoples, and then they say Indians or Indian tribes. All the Moors, it all comes back to the Moors, fam. Whereas this nation should address the broken treaties and many of the more ill-conceived federal policies that followed, such as extermination, termination, forced removal. Keep moving. Forced removal, relocation, and outlawing of traditional religions and the destruction of sacred places constantly happen. Even to this day, they're still destroying sacred tribal, spiritual grounds, sacred lands, sacred waters, fracking, building pipelines, just going through all places where they said we were supposed to be able to do what we wanted with that space. You know, the people who allegedly sold out, the people who sold out and classified themselves as the Indians and signed those agreements, those land allotments, and were working with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. These people, man, they can get their stuff sold out anytime. You know, a lot of people sold out when they took those false names and went along with that so-called 5 civilized tribe type of stuff, and they really sold our people out, fam. They really did. Let's keep going. Whereas the United States forced Indian tribes and their citizens to move away from their traditional homelands, that's here in the East, onto federally established and controlled reservations in accordance with such acts as the Indian Removal Act of 1830. See, when it says they forced them to move away from their traditional lands, that's here on the East Coast. See, that really didn't happen over on the West Coast with the whole, Lewis and Clark when they started exploring West. That was a little bit later. It was the Eastern tribes, the Eastern woodland tribes. They were forced with the Trail of Tears, the Long Walk. We're gonna go through it. Like I said, it was terminations, exterminations. And you're going to see, as it's going to state here, as I'm soon going to read, that this stuff happened on the tribal reservation lands and off of it. All right, so let's keep going. Whereas many Native people suffered and perished during the execution of these official United States government policies. They're official. This stuff wasn't done behind the closed doors. This stuff was out in the open. It was official. It straight up just happened. Forced removal, including the famous Trail of Tears and Long Walk, during bloody armed confrontations and massacres such as Sand Creek Massacre in 1864 and the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890. And see, there's numerous Indian reservations. So this stuff happened on reservations and off reservations. So think about it. A lot of this stuff happened around the same time those so-called Negro Wall Streets, Black Wall Streets were happening. They were burning down our places. Like, the people who were labeled as so-called Black and Negro of color are the indigenous people of the land. And that's what they were doing. They were using these acts against our people, the indigenous peoples, labeled as Black, Negro, colored, mulatto, quadroon, octoroon, all those misnomers as Indians. And they was just doing massacres, armed confrontations. You know what I'm saying? Our people were fighting back. We were trying to defend ourselves without having, a massive standing army as we did in antiquity. But we were banding together and we were fighting in our community, in our small little tribes and villages when we were trying to be independent and sovereign and do our own thing. They would come in. So pretty much it's saying on the reservations, think about this. On these reservations, they would tell people, yes, you can go here, you can live here, you can be perfectly fine. Then in the dead middle of the night, they know where everybody is, and they come and start rounding people up, burning stuff down, shooting, killing, dogs attacking. Trust me, they had human eating dogs. These people were savages. They had dogs that they were starved for days before they go and attack an indigenous tribe and release the dogs to eat our people. They had torture. They did torture rituals as far as like putting us in holes, digging holes and putting us inside of them and letting the dogs get at us. Anybody who tried to climb out or any part of the body that was exposed, they did that. So let's keep moving. So we gotta remember, this stuff was like Greenwood and the Negro Wall Streets, all the ones on the East Coast. So even after it was happening on the East Coast and different tribes were moved to reservations in Oklahoma territory. It even was happening there. And anywhere where we were prospering. All right, fam, let's keep moving. Where the United States government condemned traditions, beliefs, and customs of Native peoples and endeavored to assimilate them by such policies as the redistribution of land under General Allotment Act of 1887 and the forcible removal of Native children from their families and to faraway boarding schools where their native practices and languages were degraded and forbidden. See, so that's how they did it, fam. Well, how do you think a lot of our families and our people lost our language? Lost our languages, lost our traditions. They outlawed them. They forbid them. They persecuted people for it, for even saying that you were an indigenous person. You had to identify as the labels they put on you. If you said you were a Moor, if in those days, Birth of a Nation, the original Birth of a Nation, if you watch that movie, what they were doing to the Moors, they show it, how they was ripping the feathers off these people. But if you said you were Moor, if you said you were Indian, indigenous, and you were standing on your square, standing on your ground, they would attack you in mobs, hang you, burn your land to the ground, and pretty much just take your land. You know, your family will be left with nothing if your family survived. So a lot of people were afraid, and it went as far as they were letting them, like the General Allotment Act of taking the land, sectioning off tribal land, and labeling it as farmland and giving it to other immigrant settlers who came here, and then removing our children from the homes and sending them to faraway boarding schools where they could not speak their languages. We could not speak our languages. We could not practice our traditional religions and beliefs, spiritualities, practices. We couldn't do that stuff. They even tried to take away our names. Because a lot of us did lose our names. So, you know, a lot of this information was protected by family, or it was passed down through word of mouth. That's why you hear a lot of people say their grandmother or their grandfather told them, "Oh yeah, we have Indian in our family, or we Indian, or we come from native indigenous peoples." All right, so let's keep on going. Whereas officials of the United States government and private United States citizens harmed Native peoples by unlawful acquisition and recognized tribal land and theft of resources from the territories and mismanagement of tribal trust funds. That's a big one right there. Mismanagement of tribal trust funds. Ooh, that's a big one. See, they don't really talk about that one. These tribal trust funds. Funds set aside for the indigenous inhabitants of the land that by treaty they're supposed to hold until we're ready to take our proper place and be the rulers of the land, the Els, the Bays, the Alis, the Days, the Ills, to take our rightful place as the Moors, fam. Bring the empire back. Let's go. Rise of the Moors. Shout out to the brother Jamal, holding it down. All the rise of the Moors. Peace and love. For real. Whereas, let's keep going. Whereas the policies of the United States government toward Indian tribes and the breaking of covenants with Indians. See? That's all on there. Breaking of covenants with Indian tribes have contributed to the severe ills and economic troubles of many Native communities today. Now, not just to say that the people on the reservations aren't struggling, but a lot of people fail to realize that another place that the so-called black Indians, so-called, the Moors, where the Moors that were mislabeled, misnomered as Negro, black, colored, mulatto, quadroon, octoroon, Indian, those were placed into ghettos, so-called hoods. Think about it. These communities are extremely impoverished, severe social ills and economic troubles. To this day, family, to this day, still the same thing is going on. Let's keep going. Whereas despite continuing maltreatment and of native peoples by the United States, the native peoples have remained committed to the protection of this great land, as evidenced by the fact that on a per capita basis, more native peoples have served in the United States Armed Forces and placed themselves in harm's way in the defense of the United States in every major military conflict than any other ethnic group. Gotta remember that. Since the beginning, fam, we have been